Welcome to McGuire on Wrestling.
Allow me to reintroduce myself.
With Mike McGuire.
Stand up, son. Let me take a good look at you.
This guy's a serious professional.
You know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
Well, the professional wrestling. Do I have your attention now?
Done shilling. I'm done shilling, okay?
Let's get this show on the road.
I love professional wrestling.
Hi, thanks for checking out this week's show, McGuire on Wrestling, on the radio and online, and so proud to be a part of your listening patterns, whatever you choose to download or ingest as far as pro wrestling radio goes. That's what we're here to do, and this week we've got a loaded show for you, all sorts of different perspectives on some of the big stories of the week, plus we're going to do another preview of an upcoming indie spotlight, a guy I met a little while ago, actually probably about 2 years ago I first met him, but we finally got to sit down and chat out of Edmonton. His name is LEVI Night, and turns out he actually has a homestead close to where I was living a couple of years ago in small town rural Saskatchewan, and he'll tell you all about those roots as well as what's made him want to become a professional wrestler and how this is actually kind of a shared family dream. So that's on the way. Also this week, another Canadian woman is making history, winning the Lou Thez Award. This time, though, it's the Lou Thez Award for the Cauliflower Alley Club. So there's a couple of Lou Thez wrestling awards out there. I'm sure there's several in some smaller realms as well, because it's not hard to name an award after somebody, but at the same time, when it has some gravitas behind it, and this is the big one. This is the Cauliflower Alley Club's Lou Thez Award, and Nattie Neidhart has been named as this year's recipient. Big deal for those in the pro wrestling business, because this is one of those peer-voted awards. So Joe and I are going to reminisce on some of the highlights of Nattie Neidhart's career. Natalya in WWE. Of course, she's been branching out more and more as of late. At this point in her career, it's like she can do kind of everything. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. Joe has some perspective through her career. I have some perspective from knowing her before then and getting the chance to see her wrestle in the Stampede Wrestling days here in Alberta. Plus, we took a poll this week on Jey Uso losing the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Is Jey Uso a, quote, transitional champion? This is a popular term among wrestling fans and some pundits where they feel that he may have had too short of a title run, and if so, losing it back to the guy he won it from, is that making it a transitional championship, or is it making it a feud for something down the line? And we're going to have a completely fresh perspective on the world of pro wrestling, something I think everybody that does a show like this, everybody that writes about wrestling, reads about the nitty-gritty of wrestling, and all points in between, needs to remember. And I had the chance to remember just that earlier this weekend. I was actually out at an event for my day job, and I'll save the rest for you for the segment for when it happens. But want to thank you for checking out the show real quick. If you want to support the show, a couple things. We've extended the t-shirt sale for 2 more weeks. Our friends at So Normal Printing in Lethbridge are getting the new equipment all lined up and ready to go. So again, my apologies if you ordered anything above 2X. They are being printed hopefully as we speak, and will be in the mail as soon as possible. I'm going to try and send a couple goodies to those that have been waiting extra long for their t-shirts as well. Plus, on top of that, if you'd like to support the show in other ways, it's easy to do on our website, celebratewrestling.com. There is a PayPal donation option there if you have it in your heart. Again, we're not doing this for money, but it's greatly appreciated if you want to throw a couple bucks our way, cover some costs, takes care of some bills. And, some people just really say that, you know what, I've paid more for less. People also say they've paid more for more, but that's another story. Anyway, if you want to help the show out that way, PayPal, celebratewrestling.com is where you can do that. But again, we're always free, always about pro wrestling. And we got lots to talk about this week. So let's jump right into it. First of all, with the 5 top stories from the past week, it is the 5.
You want to hear the breaking news?
Well, of course, the shocker from this past Monday's Raw, there were a few actually, including the return of Bayley, Ron Killings giving a heartfelt promo, and Gunther defeating Jey Uso for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Now, this sets up an interesting set of cards here if what's being rumored is to be believed of what's happening. See, WWE has Saturday night's main event coming up on July the 12th. That's going to be in Atlanta, Georgia, a city that's very important to WWE alumni and Hall of Famer Goldberg, who has been training for his last match. Now, the belief was always that it was going to be Goldberg versus Gunther, even though it's a horrible mistake and should be Goldberg versus Dominic Mysterio, but that's another story for another time. Going back to the rumor, it is believed that this Monday night, June 16th, on WWE's Raw on Netflix, Goldberg is expected to make an appearance on the show and challenge Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship. Of course, this is all speculation, but a number of websites and reporters say this is the way it's going to be. So we'll see what actually shakes down here for Raw and for a potential Goldberg versus Gunther match. But again, will it be for the championship? Will it be championship versus retirement? Will it be announced that it's Goldberg's retirement match for the championship? Or will the belt even play a factor at all? Which begs the question then, why did Jey Uso lose it to begin with? So many questions. Nattie Neidhart, known as WWE's Natalya, has been given the honor of the Luthez Award through the Cauliflower Alley Club. Now, if you don't know what the Cauliflower Alley Club is, this has been around for decades now. And it started out as a convention for wrestlers to get together and just kind of meet each other outside of company walls and reminisce, tell stories, and also pay tribute to each other. There's been fundraising efforts throughout the years to support other wrestlers. And it really is kind of just a homecoming for a lot of the old wrestlers from back in the day. Well, they have since grown the event into a ceremony as well, and one of those ceremonies is the Luthez Award through the Cauliflower Alley Club. Nattie Neidhart has been chosen as the first woman to receive this award. This is a big deal. Now, you may recall that Trish Stratus won a Luthez Award as well. That was actually through the National Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Again, not diminishing the honor there either. That's a big deal as well. She was the first woman to do that. But the Cauliflower Alley Club is largely deemed as being significant due to the fact that it's voted on by members of the club and wrestling peers throughout the decades. So, big congratulations going out to Natalya. Can't wait to see what she has to say upon winning the award. But she did talk about it on Busted Open this past week and had nothing but great things to say about the honor and the significance of that. Shifting over to the business side of things, this came out early in the week that AEW's U.S. broadcast partner, Warner Brothers Discovery, will be splitting into two different companies, with one side focusing largely on the cable and broadcast networks, while the other side is going to focus on streaming content. Now, you might remember the name David Zaslav coming up, especially a lot from AEW's side. He's the guy who's been credited as being AEW's biggest supporter within Warner Brothers Discovery, and he is now going to be heading the streaming division. Now, the split doesn't fully realize until sometime in 2026. There's lots of factors that go into this as well, but safe to say it'll be interesting to see what happens when the companies are rebranded moving forward here. Now, this isn't expected to actually impact anything with AEW broadcasting or contracts in the immediate future either, although when it comes time to re-up, it might be a different story moving forward. But again, this is all very speculative right now and very, very much in motion, so there's not much that AEW fans have to worry about anytime soon when it comes to their shows being broadcast through WBD. Best wishes going out to friend of the show and former guest, Charles Wright, a.k.a. The Godfather. The Good Father. We don't talk about that one as much. Papa Shango and Kama Mustafa. Godfather posted a pretty scary photo of a Dodge Ram truck after he'd been involved in a rollover and says he came out unscathed. Shortly after the incident, he had this to say on his social media.
Hey guys, I just want everybody to know that I'm okay. I came out of this without a scratch. It's just really bad weather here in West Virginia. We started hydroplaning. I wasn't driving, but we started hydroplaning, then went into a 3-truck roll. But it's going to take more than that to take me out. But thank you, everybody, for the concern. I just want to let everybody know I'm okay, and I'm still smoking.
All the best going out to Mr. Charles Wright. And if you want to hear that interview, go back in the archives of McGuire on Wrestling on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook or CelebrateWrestling.com pages, and you'll see that interview with The Godfather. Legitimately one of my favorite guests of all time. And some interesting news coming out of Mexico as WWE and AAA's next co-presentation is expected to be coming up in August and is set to have Rey Mysterio facing El Hijo del Vikingo for the AAA Mega Championship. Also, AEW reaffirming their relationship with CMLL, and the Grand Slam Mexico lineup now sees several matches, including MJF versus Mystico. Zeuxis, the CMLL Women's Champion, will face Mercedes Moné, who is listed right now as the TBS champion, obviously, for AEW. The Death Riders and the Young Bucks versus Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay and the Ops. Plus, this will be crazy. Listen to this. Lio Rush versus Ricochet versus Hologram versus Mascara Dorada. Kazuchika Okada and Mark Briscoe will face off, and the TNT champion Adam Cole and Daniel Garcia with Brody King and Templario and Bandito and Atlantis Jr. taking on FTR, Josh Alexander, Takeshita, Kyle Fletcher, and Hechicero. These multi-man matches are nuts, especially when they're done in a Lucha Libre style. So we'll see how that all shakes down, but that show is coming up this Wednesday night for AEW's Dynamite.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, there's lots to talk about in pro wrestling, and of course, we're going to dive deep into some of those subjects this week, and Dave Meltzer's away, but I had an interesting interaction with a fan this week, and I wanted to share it with you here. You know, we're all mostly grown adults that listen to shows like this, and we've been wrestling fans, and we're still passionate about what we believe in and what we spend our money on. That's what being a fan is all about. And people like to maybe have fun at the expense of pro wrestling fans. Oh, how can you buy into that? How can you believe it's real? You know what? If you've ever bought a t-shirt for your favorite TV show, movie, sports team, we're all the same. We're all the same. But we need to remember sometimes, I feel, that there was a little part of us inside that grew up just loving things for the sake of loving them. That's why we always say on our shows here, we like liking things. We might complain about it sometimes, but overall, we're never going to be people to say that, hey, I hate this. This is dumb. This is stupid. Because it's not. It's something we love, and sometimes it ticks us off. But overall, we love being pro wrestling. And I met a young guy while I was on location this weekend for my radio job. And he's a friend of someone of mine. And he is 10 years old. His name is Rowan, and he found out that I do this show as well as work in the world of pro wrestling a little bit. And he had a ton of questions for me about pro wrestling. So I thought, just for fun, I'd turn it around and talk to him about it. So here is Rowan. Rowan, how old are you?
10.
And you're a big wrestling fan. We were just sitting here talking about your favorite wrestlers. Name some of your favorites for me again.
Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, Cody Rhodes.
Right, and who else? I think you said you like Solo Sikoa.
Yeah, Solo Sikoa also.
What do you think of Jacob Fatu?
No.
No, you're not a Fatu guy?
No.
What about the never seen 17 John Cena? No. Wow, okay. So let me ask you this. How do you feel about Gunther being the champion again and beating Jey Uso?
Terrible.
Why is it terrible?
Because Jey Uso's my favorite out of all the ones I listed, and I like him better than Gunther.
Yeah, what do you like most about Jey Uso?
I like his spear.
Yeah?
And his super kick.
Yeah, what about the yeeting?
Yeah.
Are you down to yeet?
Yeah.
Yeah? So if I were to say 4 letters, 1 word, you'd say?
Yeet.
Yeet. Yeet. That's awesome. Let me ask you this. SummerSlam is coming up. Naomi has the Money in the Bank for the ladies. Seth Rollins has the Money Bank for the men's. Do you think that either one of them are going to cash in?
I think Naomi's going to cash in probably on Liv Morgan or Rhea Ripley.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. All right. Well, you know what? I like this. So we'll see what happens. We'll see if either of them become champion, first of all. But you know what, Rowan? It's been a pleasure talking wrestling with you. And how long have you been a wrestling fan?
Probably since I was 5.
That's like half your life.
Yeah.
That's like some of the adults listening to the show, too, only it's a little more sad when we say it.
Yeah.
Rowan, it's great to meet you. Thanks, buddy.
Bye.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
The alternate commentary table, ACT, brought to you by the Celebrate Wrestling podcast feed. Listen, it's Mitch, it's Dimitri. We got this little pod thing that we do every single week where we talk about the week in wrestling and the way in which we do it from the other side of the railing. Right, Mitch?
I like that.
We're coming at it because we love it. We hate it. The alternate commentary table, ACT. Download it anywhere where you're getting your podcasts. Cha-cha!
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Well, here to talk a little more about the Jey Uso situation here from one of our shows on the feed. He's a regular contributor to Legends and Champions with Andy Evans, and all the way in the UK, it is Stefan Bennet. How are you, sir?
I'm not too bad, thank you, Mike. It's good to be here, speaking with you again and going on topics.
Thanks for making the time for us here. I want to get your opinion because I know you guys usually cover a lot of the classic wrestling stuff, but you guys are still watching and paying attention every week. And it's funny because I don't get to have you on as much talking about the present day stuff. So I thought, well, this would be fun. And it's a conversation that I've seen floating around on the internet here. There is no right or wrong opinion in this, okay? That we want to state that right now. We're going to have our opinions about it. We're going to read some of yours as well that came in on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page here. But talking about the notion that Jey Uso was a, quote, transitional champion. And for those that don't know the term, what that usually means is a champion that wins a title for maybe a week, 2, maybe a month, and then loses it to someone else. That way, protecting the previous opponent and the future champion from having a match right away and offering a bit of a buffer there. So a great example of it is Bob Backlund winning the WWF championship from Bret Hart in, very conspicuous ways. Just to lose the title a week later to Big Daddy Cool Diesel in Madison Square Garden at a house show, a non-televised event. I mean, I remember when I heard about that, it blew my mind that it happened because I think we saw Bob with the belt like once, and that was it. And then he lost the title to Diesel right then and there. So, and it was a squash match too. It was very, very fast. I think 6 seconds was the time. Yeah. Either way, that's an idea of a transitional champion. Now, we've also heard from 10-year-old Rowan this morning, who I interviewed, who's a big wrestling fan. And he doesn't care about any of this stuff. He doesn't care about a transitional champion. He doesn't care about what's right, what's wrong for storylines. He likes his guys that he likes and boos the ones that he doesn't like. So we have to remember that this discussion is proving just how nerdy us grown adult wrestling fans can get about this stuff. Stefan, agree or disagree that focusing on a transitional champion is worth talking about?
I think any time you put one of the main titles on anyone, even if it is transitional or not, is always worth talking about because it's in the history books. And you mentioned 10-year-old Rowan. I mean, I missed the days of being that age when I had the exact same mindset. I liked who I liked. I disliked who I liked. I didn't care about all that sort of stuff.
I didn't say this in the interview, and he didn't say it until we talked afterwards. But I said, Rowan, honestly, between you and me, did you say Roman Reigns because his name kind of sounds like yours? He goes, yep. I was like, dude, that's perfect. Like, man, I wish. But somehow we get wrapped up in this stuff. So we are going to go. And you know what? It is worth talking about only because as fans, this shows how much we care about this stuff moving forward. I still remember, and I've quoted it before, Sting in an interview talking about wrestling fans that obsess about what they see on pro wrestling all the time and throw their arms up in the air and, I'm never watching again just to watch next week. He says, you watch it because you love it. You don't want to admit it, but you love it. And if you didn't love it, you wouldn't care so much. So let's get into some of the feedback here. Then we'll give our opinions at the end here, I think, Stefan. But let's start off here with Blaine, who on the poll question, was Jey Uso a transitional champion? Why or why not? And then the answers were yeet or no yeet. Right now, the poll sits at 60% yeet or yes, 40% no. He was not a transitional champion. But Blaine says he was better in the chase, but either way, his title run was doomed to fail from the start. As long as there are 2 titles, he would have always been the other champion. In a lot of cases, he was positioned lower than the IC or women's titles. Wow. Agree or disagree?
I partly agree. It was doomed. I think for me, I when I sort of looked at this and went, yeah, I think this is doomed to fail, was when the build up to WrestleMania with Gunther wasn't as focused as what the Cody Cena picture was. And also the fact that once they announced that Jey and Gunther were going to open night 1 of WrestleMania and not main event night 1 of WrestleMania, I kind of looked at that and was like, yeah, I've got a bad feeling about this, to quote Han Solo.
Bob Hunt, or our friend known as Over Analytical Bob, says, firstly, Linguistically, yoink is the opposite of yeet. Thanks, Bob. Secondly, Netflix extended its entrance to about 9 minutes by showing people yeeting through the commercial break. And thirdly, I forgot what your question was in the first place. Okay, Bob, thanks for not answering the question. Let's go to Craig Usher, who brings up a great point talking about this transitional champion thing. Transitional champion to get the belt from Gunther back to Gunther? That's an interesting point. To which Mike Marquardt actually agreed. He says transitional is like Kofi Kingston beating Daniel Bryan to drop to Brock Lesnar, or like Bryan was supposed to be when he took the title from Randy Orton so he could drop it to Brock Lesnar. A lot of people are bringing up the Brock Lesnar thing here. It's an afterthought reign and probably wasn't meant to be very long. He's not the guy, but it's not transitional because he didn't transition from one heel to another. He just lost it back after 7 weeks. Okay. Devin follows up by saying, I don't think Triple H saw him as champion, and Goldberg and Gunther was always the plan. The Disney Sandman, I saw that on Twitter, he says, was always a gift to the fans, and his money was in the chase. Same with Kofi. You know, there's a lot of argument for the chase here. I didn't mind Jey in the chase. When it came down to Showtime, though, like you were talking about, when they actually started building the feud, we talked about it on the show, how the emotion kind of felt a little late or a little forced, you know, with the attack on Jimmy and all these other things. Like, it didn't quite seem to be fully there. But Jason Christmas says, Jey Uso can't cut a good promo, had a limited moveset, and was just an entrance. He was and is really a good tag team wrestler. I won't miss him in the, quote, main event. Ouch. Tell us how you really feel, Jason.
Yeah. Well, that's a little harsh.
Well, you know what, though? I mean, I've said, too, you know, the entrance is what really sold a lot of people on Jey Uso. And the fact that he runs it back. Do you know what I mean? I've never seen anyone besides perish the thought here, but anyone but Vince McMahon run their entrance back and to get a bigger pop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. He's got a point though where he says about the whole promo thing, and that I kind of get that. I think Jay's promos were very, very one-dimensional. They were very pretty much just rehashing the same thing over and over, which is, nobody thinks I can do this. I can do this. I can do this on my own. And it was like, okay, yeah, Jey, you've told us this for the past month now, every week, and it did get a little bit tiring there.
Justin Drummond says, I don't think so. I don't think he was a transitional champion because I don't think the plan was to make him a transitional champion. I just think Triple H may have more than his father-in-law's traits when we think and made a snap decision. Interesting. I wonder if he means the snap decision was to put the belt on Jey or to put it back on Gunther.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. But it does remind me of one thing Triple H did always say when he took over, which was, I'm not always going to make the right decisions. I'm not going to be perfect. And I think this is one of those things where I think, you know, Jay's over. Let's give them something. Let's give the fans something. And when it was, you know, we were on that journey, however short it was, maybe I think something sort of switched and maybe they thought, yeah, actually, this isn't quite working the way we had hoped, and you know, and now we know why.
Scott Ainsworth, all the way in Australia, says, I think that they need to have some, quote, main event, pun intended, talent. The era that most of us find the fondest, the belt would change between 4 to 5 guys with no real reign. Most of the time, the title changed 8 to 10 times per year. If Jey goes back to being a tag team person, I'll retract the statement, but I feel that this was the first reign, not the only one. And that's an interesting point. You know, even go back to Hogan. Like, his reigns were never the longest.
No.
For a long period of time. Brett, another perfect example of a guy who had multiple reigns but wasn't the longest reign. Even Flair's reigns weren't that long to have that many of them. So there is some value in the chase. Do they do things to tweak Jey Uso to make him more compelling to get back in the chase? Or does it, you know, like you said, turn out to be an imperfect decision here? That's not for us to know until it happens. But that is an interesting statement there about the length of title reigns. And we're so used to the Roman Reigns title length. And even Cody's reign went for a considerable amount of time before he lost to Cena. So very, very interesting stuff here. Math Baker says it was his tryout, in my opinion. People forget a lot of the greats' first run were short and criticized. Triple H's first title run was hated by journalists and fans. It was his trial, and he went on to be a great champ. KYJ had an awful first run. It's his way to test the temperature. We will know by numbers how good it was and act accordingly. Those are great points as well.
Very.
So,
yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where the first title, I remember whenever a new person would enter the title scene, even when The Rock first won the championship, I was like, really? This guy? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you remember, they kind of put Rikishi in the title picture, but they never put it on him. He was one of the only ones in that group that they didn't put the title on. But going back to the whole thing about Jey Uso potentially going back to being a tag team wrestler, I don't think that can happen now. I think the era of the Usos as a tag team is pretty much done, and that's my personal opinion on the basis of the tag team division is in a strange place at the moment. And I think with how how much the Usos have done together, I think really they should look at what they want to do long term with Jimmy and Jey, because obviously Jimmy hasn't had anywhere near the focus and the push that Jey has. I think Jey offers something slightly more, but I agree with you that they got to tweak some things with Jey. They've got to push him to see how far he is capable of going as a main player. Otherwise, I expect him to be kind of just, mid-card Jey Uso, so to speak, and just being sort of like the US title or the Intercontinental title picture going forward.
I've been obsessed with trying to figure out who KYJ was. I think he's having fun by talking about Chris Jericho and Y2J. Yeah. Okay. I was like, I'm reading this. I'm like, what the hell is a KYJ? But now it makes sense. And I do remember Jericho's first run. I don't know. His first run was the Undisputed Championship, right? He had both belts and everything else. Well, I guess technically his first run was that time he beat Triple H, but then they took it off him. Anyway.
Yeah, Earl Hebner's fast count.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get down to brass tacks here, Stefan. Your final thoughts here. Oh, I do have one more that I do want to tie in, but I want to wait until we get our final thoughts on Jey being a transitional champion here first. Was this a transitional championship? Was this a short-term reign? And do you see Jey Uso being champion again?
I don't think it was transitional. I think that there may have been more of a longevity to the reign planned, but for whatever reason, they've obviously seen something and gone, the title reign's not going the way we thought. I am surprised they put it straight back on Gunther. I didn't think he was going to take the title back so soon. I actually expected, I was almost dead certain on Seth Rollins being the one to dethrone Jey Uso, whether it be through Money in the Bank or even just in a match. I don't mind that they've taken the title off of Jey Uso. I said this to Andy Evans. I'm a little surprised that they didn't do it maybe at Night of Champions, like do it on a PLE. I do like the odd surprise now where a title can change hands on Raw. But for me, I think it might have been better off being done on a PLE, maybe at Night of Champions. Whether or not we'll see Jey in the main event picture again for the title, I don't know if we'll see him as champion again. I agree with you. They need to make some tweaks with him and see just how far he can take it. I mean, he's had that little run now. He's had that taste. He's had that little bit of experience now. He knows what's required of someone to carry one of the big titles. And I think a lot of that's now on Jey going forward and what he can prove to say, hey, look, I've had a taste of this. I can do more. Like, put it on me again and I'll show you. And we'll see what happens. But I don't think we will.
I'm leaning towards the short title reign angle as well. I think that this is something that they can revisit down the road if they want to / need to. There's a lot of main event players in WWE right now, though, that don't have a title around their waist here. Vince Bond, this is the last comment here on the post, says, yes, he was transitional champion, especially if this leads to Gunther versus Goldberg, which is the elephant in the room we haven't talked about during this entire segment here. Now, that aside, you're talking about Seth Rollins. Here's what I've been thinking over the last week here since this happened. If the story is true, and we talked about it in the 5 count earlier on, if the story is true that Goldberg is showing up on Raw this Monday, and the plan is to have him face Gunther in Atlanta on Saturday night's main event for the championship, in his retirement match, see if you like this or not. And I'm not saying it's the right answer. I'm not saying it's the answer. Gunther versus Goldberg, retirement match. Goes longer than any of us think it would. Gunther carries a lot of it. Goldberg gets the jackhammer, gets the spear, gets everything he needs to get done in there. Grunts, groans, snorts, pins, wins the title. And then Seth Rollins cashes in and takes the championship. Does that make any sense?
No, because I don't believe we need Goldberg to have a retirement match. Not definitely for the title. I think. Also,
okay, but if it's happening though, and we'll find out again on Monday night.
We will find out. Yeah, that's true. We will find out. I mean, if that happens, it would make sense that it would do that. My concern is, and this is the concern I had about the finish of the Jey Gunther match at WrestleMania, is there's got to be an element of protecting the legitimacy of the kind of persona that Gunther is. They've built this huge guy who is very old school. He's very much pro the legacy of the sport, a guy who's extremely tough to beat, beaten pretty much everyone. And if they have him tap out to Jey at WrestleMania, which I thought was a bad call, I didn't like that finish, as we touched on before, and then to have him regain the title to then lose it straight away to Goldberg, I think they've got to protect Gunther a little bit. But I do think there is some legitimacy to what you say. If what you say is correct and this is how it goes down, then that's how they'll do it. And, we like it or we don't like it. There's nothing we can do about it. But I'm not a fan of there being any necessity for Gunther or Goldberg having a final match at this stage anyway. He did it all with Brock and Kevin Owens and we've seen all the, these little swan song matches that Goldberg's done. Fair play to him for a guy of his age. He's still, fantastic shape. But I think ultimately within the next month or so, I believe the title will be on Seth Rollins. I think that's getting cashed in pretty soon.
Well, it would time out perfectly within a month or so, you say.
Yeah.
July 12th is only a month or so away. Just saying.
It could be. I mean, that's where I think we question when things get a little too predictable with WWE. And that's the bit I don't like. I like a surprise. I like a shock. But I think sometimes you've got to look at the bigger picture. And if that's how it goes down, that's how it goes down. I'd rather them do it, get it out of the way, get it over and done with so we can move on.
Mr. Iguana, World Heavyweight Champion.
I'm here for it. I can't understand the honestly, the comments, the negativity surrounding Mr. Iguana. Look, we know that long term it's not going to be a craze that's going to go on for a very, very long time. It's something that's going to be fun in the now. Let's embrace it. Let's enjoy it for what it is, what it's going to be, and and just see how that plays out. And then we will then move on to that for whenever the next gimmick comes in.
All right. You're over-explaining now, Stefan. You're over-explaining the joke. It's all good. Stefan Bennet, you can hear him on our podcast feed, part of Legends and Champions with Andy Evans, talking all about, it turned out to be Gunther versus Goldberg, but the Jey Uso title reign. Again, leave your thoughts on the Celebrate Wrestling Facebook page. We're back with more in just a minute. Thank you, Stefan.
Cheers, Mike. Take care.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
CKXU-FM 88.3 in Lethbridge is Southern Alberta's true alternative radio station.
The cream of the crop! Nobody does it better.
Proudly carrying McGuire on Wrestling every week.
Yeah.
If you're looking for something different to listen to,
this is gonna be a slobber knocker!
Check out our NCRA award-winning lineup of programs or stream us anytime at ckxu.com.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Joe Aguinaldo going to join me in just a bit as we're going to talk all about Nattie Neidhart and the huge honor she's receiving from the Cauliflower Alley Club. But here on the show, we have Dave Meltzer on all the time. We talk about the international wrestling scene. We talk about big TV, but we also like to talk about independent wrestlers out there from across Canada and around the world that are making a name for themselves, getting known and getting championships. That's what it's all about, right? So today I got to talk to a guy who I first met a couple years ago. Actually, when I just started McGuire on Wrestling, he was on a card for CWE in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, I want to believe. And I'm pretty sure that's where it was. And I'd never seen this guy before. And out comes this ginger, pale, sleazy looking, but still really loved disco style guy. He's got the long handlebar mustache, the big flowing hair, the rainbow, the tassels, you name it, and he's something else. So here we are a few years later, and I find out that he's coming down to my area. So I said, you know what, I want to talk to this guy a little bit. You're going to get a full independent spotlight on him coming up this Friday on the podcast feed, but here is a preview of my chat with Levi Night. A little teaser of an independent spotlight here on McGuire on Wrestling.
My dad always just watched it. It was always on. And then we went to WrestleMania 26.
Nice.
When I was a
Arizona.
kid. Yeah. And that was like, after that, I was like, okay, I'm hooked on this. And I like watched everything. And then out of high school, I went to Calgary and trained with Lance Storm. Yeah. And came back to Saskatchewan and learned about all the promotions. And after wrestling for a little bit, got with CWE, and like they asked me like, hey, like they just did Weyburn or something. They're like, well, I think we could do Carnduff because that's not too far. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well, yeah, so. And that's this kind of the CWE MO. We talked about it a bit with Mentolo here on one of these independent spotlights where CWE is doing it smart. It's kind of like small market radio, which is the business I'm in, where if you can, you can try and fight in the big cities, or you can go to smaller markets, be the entertainment, and make the money. You know what I mean? So that to me makes all the sense in the world here. Did you ever? What year did you started then?
I started January of 2020.
Okay,
but in March everything shut down.
Yeah,
and then like in Saskatchewan there was no wrestling until July the next year, 2021.
No, because HIW had shut down. You had Ringside that were doing shows until COVID, and then you had Birdo's group in Saskatoon that kind of took over up there. Mm. But did you ever work any of those, or?
I did. I was just getting on those before.
Yeah.
Like January through March, I was just getting into all those, and then everything shut down until July the next year. Everything kicked back up finally, and then started basically rolling from there. And eventually the Carnduff show happened there.
Yeah.
That was pretty fun, and I got my dad to come in, and he like saved me at the end.
Nice.
And like, because the whole time, like everyone knows that he wanted to be a wrestler. Now I'm wrestling, so the whole leading up to the show, everyone's like his nickname's Cubby, so like, hey Cubby, you gonna get in the ring coming up? So I just kind of shot it on him too, because the night of I just texted him, I was like, come downstairs, like, and he comes down. I'm like, okay, you're gonna come out and help me in the main event.
If it's not the promoter's kid, it's the promoter's dad, I tell you.
Yeah. But yeah, it was fun. The crowd loved it. And
that's such a cool story. No, I dig that. And that's probably one of his favorite wrestling moments in his life, if not probably the favorite,
Yeah, I was glad he could have that too.
Yeah.
From small town Saskatchewan, Levi Night. You're going to find out a lot more about him, his dad, his wrestling dreams, and his wrestling goals coming up this Friday on the McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do, and you'll get that entire interview with a special custom slide. Again, just helping promote independent wrestlers wherever we can. Well, coming up next, we're going to talk all about Nattie Neidhart, WWE's Natalya, and the huge honor that's been bestowed on her as we look back on some of her career next.
This is McGuire on Wrestling.
Legends and Champions is your weekly fix to go old school, looking at the classic world of professional wrestling. From Hulk Hogan to the Hitman Bret Hart to the Icon Sting to the total package Lex Luger, we have it all each and every week on Legends and Champions, part of the Celebrate Wrestling Network. And it's available on a Wednesday with me, Andy Evans. See you there.
Welcome back to McGuire on Wrestling.
Known as GW Joe in some circles, known as Joey Aguinaldo in other circles, the one and only Joe Aguinaldo. You're shaking your head no.
No. And although I have challenged Mitch and Dimitri to actually try to say my name on air one day. So let's see how that goes.
See, Dimitri, I feel will do fine. It's Mitch that's the problem. And if you don't know who Dimitri and Mitch are, you need to listen to the alternate commentary table. But please continue.
No, that's the entertainment about it. So,
yeah. A case of the Mitches is quickly becoming a very popular phrase among us here. I smell a t-shirt coming. Nevertheless, Joe brought you on the show today because a very cool announcement was made earlier this week. We found out that Canada's own Nattie Neidhart, or WWE star Natalya, will be the first woman to receive, now this is a very important distinction here, the Cauliflower Alley Club Lou Thez Award. She is the first woman to win this Lou Thez Award from the CAC, not to be confused with the National Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, who had Trish Stratus as their first recipient a couple years back. Now, I don't know which one holds more weight to a wrestler, but I feel, with no disrespect at all to Trish Stratus, I feel the CAC one comes a little more from the old school, comes a lot from the wrestlers coming up. And again, that's no disrespect to the National Wrestling Hall of Fame either. But this is a pretty big deal. First woman to be inducted in this ever. And the CAC has been around for a long time. So, Joe, your first initial thoughts on Nattie being the first female recipient of this?
I love it. I have always been a Nattie Neidhart fan, Natalya, whatever we're going to call her.
Mm-hmm.
I think that she has done so much for the WWE women's division, alone. With, like just how good she is training the women, being sort of that ring general, when some of the new women came up. But I will also admit too, as a like sort of an old school wrestling fan, like I love the fact that she has won this award from the Cauliflower Alley Club. I 100% agree with you, with all due respect to the National Wrestling Alliance and all the other sort of old school type associations out there. The CAC is the one. Lou Thez and George Tragos, his trainer. I have the utmost respect for him and that type of wrestler from way back in the day. Mm-hmm. So I do agree with you. I think that the Cauliflower Alley Club Award is more of an old school type wrestling, association. There's a ton of respect, especially with the older generations of wrestlers. So I think this is a massive deal. At least that's the way I'm looking at it, just knowing sort of the history of Lou Thez and being such a Nattie Neidhart fan. I think this is massive, and congratulations to her.
Well, and the CAC, you're going to hear stories all the time about guys like Harley Race and, even guys like Brett and so on coming throughout the years and the decades. And that seemed to be where a lot of the recognition from peers came from. And this is voted on by the wrestlers too. That's the thing. Whereas I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe the National Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, I believe that they ran on more of a committee. So if this is actual wrestlers saying, yeah, Nattie's the girl, she needs to be the first one to win this thing, it makes all the sense in the world. You talked about training and coming up and finding her own success. I mean, Nattie is in this weird renaissance right now, it seems. She's been wrestling in all sorts of places outside of WWE, and by all sorts, I mean GCW right now, and she's got the Evolve match. Yeah, and NWA as well. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, this is really wild to see and really interesting to see someone who is going outside of her very safe, and by very safe, I mean like she's respected. She's one of those legacy wrestlers now. But at the same time, her and TJ have that Dungeon 2.0 built in their home. The amount of names that have gone through that we don't know. All right, we've seen the ones that we do know that have gone through that building, but the ones we don't know that have probably spent some time in that ring, it's probably astronomical. Because don't forget, they live in an area around a bunch of fellow wrestlers, a bunch of fellow WWE stars, AEW stars. It doesn't matter. A lot of people have gone through that ring to get better, and it's Nattie with the help of TJ and others that are making that happen. So when you talk about someone who gives back to the business as well and gives back to pro wrestling, I think that Nattie is an easy choice by far in this whole thing.
100%. And let's also include the fact that she has been able to, what's the word I'm looking for, adjust her style from, the Divas era all the way up to today's era, where the women are much more athletic, and they know the moves, they've better work, whatever you want to call it. And Nattie has been either, helping push that revolution along, or training these women, like you said, with the Dungeon 2.0. Again, I cannot say enough good things about Nattie.
You're listening to McGuire on Wrestling. I'm Mike McGuire. Joe Aguinaldo joining us from his place in Mississauga, Ontario. We're talking about Canada's own Nattie Neidhart, or WWE superstar Natalya, being the first to receive the Cauliflower Alley Club's Lou Thez Award, the first woman, I should say, to receive this award here. And again, what an honor and what a distinction that is. We're based in southern Alberta, Canada, not too far from Calgary, so obviously there's going to be a lot of bias from folks here. But Nattie is really one of those things. It's funny, if you're a Canadian on the roster, it doesn't matter. We had Chris Jericho on the show once talk about that, where he was, he was doing some press for, I can't remember where he said, I think it was Toronto. And he's like, I'm from Winnipeg, people won't care. And they it was the exact opposite. Or it might have actually been Edmonton, I don't know. But it was one of those things where if you're a token Canadian on the show, you tend to automatically get the cheers and the boos and the love and everything. But this isn't placating or pandering to the fact that she's Canadian. This is someone who, no matter where she would be from, has done something absolutely incredible with her career. And, it's hard not to think back to when she first started in WWE, as she came out with Harry and TJ as the tag team champions at one point, and she was kind of the valet, and then you found out she could wrestle as well. Then they tried to break her solo. I can't remember if this actually happened first, or I'd have to look at the order. But remember, they really tried to tie her to her dad. So they even, she dyed her hair red, and she was doing the laugh, or trying to do the anvil laugh, right?
I forgot about that.
But you remember it now, right?
Yeah.
This was a thing. And it was just trying to tie her to that. And it just, as much as she loves her family and obviously loves her father, it was like a dog meowing. It just didn't quite fit what she was doing. And over the years, it's funny you say adjusting her style. I don't know if she adjusted her style as much as she was responsible for a lot of the women adjusting their styles. Because that Divas era is well known, and I've talked to Trish Stratus about it. I've talked to other wrestlers about it through the years. It's one of those things where the wrestling wasn't the feature of the match. It was what kind of skimpy outfits can they come out in. But with Nattie, it was very rarely about the skimpy outfits. I think she did maybe one bikini contest once. And even that's like a reach now, But when it comes down to wrestlers today, especially women wrestlers, I think, more to quote Brett, talking about some of the guys and saying, a lot of wrestlers are having Bret Hart matches more than they're having like a Hulk Hogan match. I think a lot of women are having Nattie Neidhart or Natalya matches more than they're having any sort of Divas match. There's no a lot less hair pulls. Remember the old hair pull toss? There's a lot less, chicanery, spanking in the ring, whatever, stuff like that. These matches are actually matches now, and I think Nattie paved the way for a lot of that.
100%. And I think, to your point, I think she still adjusted her style, but you're right. I think she was also at the forefront of, changing the style and the perception of women's wrestling as we moved away from that Divas era to where we are now.
Well, that's the thing too. We always hear about these wrestlers that, they're such a great wrestler. They do all these amazing things, and they get to WWE and they do kind of the basic systematic matches. Just because you don't see them pull out 1,000 moves doesn't mean they've forgotten how to do them. Doesn't mean they don't know what they're doing. And, when you have women who still like to get physical and contribute in ways that allows them to flex that talent more, it turns into something that allows them to showcase that talent more. And I think that, again, like you said, the styles of matches, we always knew that Nattie had that style in her, but again, she gets to showcase it more. We've seen that more with the GCW and the NWA appearances now, where she's really, leaning into being, she's even recognizing it now. She's kind of doing a Ron Killings thing. There's Natalya and there's Nattie, and we'll see which opponent she gets when. I heard her say that on a show recently, and I was like, that's kind of cool. I dig it.
Yeah, I like that a lot, actually. I'm glad that they're giving her that opportunity to flex a little bit.
I wish Nattie would show up on TV, because I would love to see that even more.
That would be awesome.
You know what I mean? Like, if she came out all of a sudden, she's in the unitard and the mouthpiece on, and just, oh yeah, I'm all for it. I don't know if they could pay for the rights to Killing in the Name of by Rage, but that would be pretty dope too.
it would be pretty cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, obviously need a radio edit of that one, but anyway, any memorable moments? I know this is kind of putting you on the spot, Joe, but when you think about Nattie Neidhart or Natalya through the years, it would be remiss not to mention some of the crappy angles she's been in as well. We talked about the red hair thing. I'm only going to say it once. Gassy Nattie. There, it's been said.
Oh, God, no.
Let's move on from it. No, but I mean, that's the problem with stuff like that, is that people remember.
Yeah.
And that's going to be something that dogs her for the rest of her life. So there, it's been said. But when it comes down to it, like, you just look at some of the matches and some of the history that she's had. It was funny because even most recently we saw footage of Nikki Bella in the Dungeon 2.0 getting schooled and getting more physical, which, the criticism could be that Nikki was more towards that diva style back in the day. And so we'll see what she does moving forward here towards the Evolution PLE. But is there something that stands out for you particularly when it comes to Nattie?
The things that really stand out to me, oddly enough, is her work in NXT, where I thought she was amazing. Like her matches against AJ Lee and Charlotte. I think there was like two, I think like a roadblock in 2016 and a match in 2019. But like, to me, those matches were amazing. And that was where I was kind of like, yeah, Nattie knows what she's doing. Let's get her on the main TV and doing her stuff. She also had I think she had a Raw match against Ronda Rousey, which I thought was pretty good. And again, I like the idea of Nattie versus Ronda at the time, because they were, your sort of legit, submission type wrestlers. Nattie coming from the Dungeon, Ronda Rousey coming from the UFC. I thought they could have really, put a little bit more into that. But I always appreciated, matches, those matches with Nattie. And again, I'll admit, you kind of mentioned it earlier. I've always thought Nattie was good technically, and I loved, like technical good work, great wrestling. But the fact that she's Canadian kind of puts that over the top for me, because I'm always going to root for the Canadians, and I've always been a huge fan of Nattie Neidhart.
Well, I'm going to throw back to another era that we usually like to forget, and that is the Thunderdome era. And I feel that Nattie carried a lot of action there, even though she wasn't maybe the focal point of a lot of the main feuds. She was someone you knew that A, was in the area, so she could show up, and B, would actually put out some great effort and some great matches and help get other talents either over or help advance storylines there. So, I mean, there's so many things. Honestly, my favorite memories are going back to her in Stampede Wrestling in Calgary or in PWA in Edmonton, where I would see her work live. And I've mentioned this name before on here. She had a feud with a girl named Belle Lovitz back at a time where there weren't a lot of women wrestlers, period. Right. Nowadays, the population has exploded. Some better than others, obviously, but Nattie and Belle would have these feuds that would go on for months because they were the only ones that could work each other, And It was great stuff. So, I mean, there's tons of great stories, tons of great memories. You'd mentioned the NXT stuff as well. She really helped get a lot of the biggest names today over, talking about Charlotte Flair especially. Yep. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But remember when they did the figure 8 versus the sharpshooter, and Brett and Rick were at ringside, right? So I think the flowers are definitely justified. I think that the entire recognition of her career is more than overdue, but at the same time, she's not done yet. So on behalf of Joe and myself, I will say congratulations, Nattie. We're all very proud of you, and we'll see what happens moving in the future. But Joe, I'm very proud of you, my friend. Thank you very much for being part of the show as always. I don't know, I'm just trying to give the flowers here, give the bouquets out today.
All right, look, if anyone should be getting flowers, it should be Mike McGuire.
All right, you're pandering now. Stop it. You're pandering.
You know what? I'm going to nominate you for the CAC for next year.
Easy now.
We'll see where it goes.
We're not even joking about that. So there you go. But Joe, always a pleasure, my friend. You out there listening, hope you enjoyed the show this week. Dave will be back next week as well. But you know what? If you like what you're hearing, hit a subscribe, hit a download, have the automatic download ready to go. We appreciate that. Check out the alternate commentary table, which posts on Saturdays, and check out Legends and Champions, which posts midweek every week, usually on a Wednesday here in North America. And then maybe someday we've seen a movie. Return. I'm going to keep plugging it so I keep chastising myself to actually produce it and get it done. But
okay, so I do have two last things to say. Number one.
Okay.
Happy Father's Day to everyone out there.
Yes.
And number two, I would like to congratulate myself and yourself for not coming down with a case of the Mitches during this segment.
Darn right. Darn right.
Eat that, Hansius.
Until next time. Yeah. Well, look at you saying the last name. Wonder if he'll do the same. Till next time, friends. Thanks for listening. Letting us do what we do. Play safe, drive safe. Be seeing ya.
McGuire on Wrestling. Online and on the radio. Listen to the show Mondays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time at CKXU.com. Wherever you get your podcasts and at McGuireShow.com.